Welcome in to Daily Faceoff Live, your go-to source for everything hockey, live every weekday at noon Eastern.
Welcome into another playoff edition of Daily Faceoff Live, streaming live on the Daily Faceoff YouTube and brought to you by Bet365, our sports betting partner for the 2024 playoffs. We'll be here with Bet365 to give you all the news, analysis, lines, and betting info you need until just one team is left standing at the end of June. Colby, we really are about 30 days away from the last possible day that the Stanley Cup can be handed out. And tonight, the conference finals get going, and it should be a spicy one. I said, here, I'll start with this. You tell me if this is a good take or a bad take. I think the best team in every division is in the conference finals.
Absolutely. I think we've seen chalk, and we've seen the best teams show up in the biggest moments. Even when the Edmonton Oilers' backs were against the wall, they figured out a way to get it done on the road in Vancouver, Game 7. And I think we're seeing the matchups we wanted, the matchups we thought we'd see, and I think this Eastern Conference final, Tyler, is going to be an all-out war for the next 2 weeks. I really do.
We're going to be joined by Carter Hutton in about 15 minutes. He's going to give us the goaltending breakdown in this series. But let's start with the Eastern Conference final. Game 1 goes tonight out at Madison Square Garden, Colby. And it's two teams that for long stretches of this regular season, quite honestly, looked like juggernauts. I know there were some slip-ups here and there. And honestly, even through these Stanley Cup playoffs, I know they were each forced to a Game 6 in the second round, but it didn't feel like there was a lot of doubt at either point for either of these two teams. You see their record so far in the playoffs, both very, very good. The Rangers obviously had that sweep in round 1. The Panthers took down the Bolts in 5 games back in round 1. But when you look at these two sides, Colby, maybe what are some key advantages for either group?
So look, these two teams have held serve in the playoffs. There's absolutely no doubt about that. Even in the Bruins-Florida series, I think Florida really was in control, even in the games that they didn't win, and they showed why at times this year. We said there's nobody even close to as good as the Florida Panthers. And then, we're talking about the New York Rangers, the team of destiny. They've got all the momentum and the emotional ride, and they haven't won since 1994. And Mark Messier is plastered all over TV every night here in America talking about the Rangers. So this series really has the makings for big boy playoff hockey. These teams are deep down the middle. I think both of these teams are great in goal. I think that's, you're kind of leaning one way or the other with these two goaltenders. I know we'll save that and we'll talk a little bit more about that with Carter Hutton in our guest segment. But, one area for the Florida Panthers, Tyler, that I think is an advantage is the size of their blue line. You look at the way that group is built. You've got Ekblad and Forsling. It's a big, heavy pair. You've got Mikkola and Montour. Montour's 6 feet tall. Mikkola's 6'3", 6'4". Then you've got Ekman Larson and Kulikov, two more big guys. And I just think that group is able to play so physical and so mobile that even if the Rangers were to throw Matt Rempe in, I don't think it affects this D-core. I think their physicality is something that they can sort of use to their advantage. And I worry about the Rangers D-core a little bit. They've got some talent. They've got puck moving ability, but I think Adam Fox has been injured. I worry about Gustafsson on the third pair. I think about how big and heavy the Florida Panthers are down the middle and really down the wings with their forecheck. And I think that, to me, could really be the difference in this series because I think both teams are built well. They're deep up front. I think the Rangers have more skill, but I think maybe the Florida Panthers have more heavy skill. And if I have to pick, I'm going to take heavy skill over skill in the playoffs all day long. So I think those are a couple of areas maybe where these teams do differ, although they are very similar in the way that they play and the way that they're built.
Yeah, and that's something that does stand out as well. I like they use the term heavy skill, and maybe the counter to that when you look at the Rangers, and these will probably be the guys who need to try push that narrative and that argument the other way. Like Vinny Trocheck's not big, but he's not afraid to go anywhere on the ice. Chris Kreider's not big. He's not afraid to go anywhere on the ice. So I do think that's maybe where I'll give the Rangers a little bit more credit. They got guys who are having unbelievable playoffs who play like they're 6'5", even if they're not even 6 feet.
Yeah, I just wonder, like, who's going to be the answer for Matthew Tkachuk, and who's going to be the answer for Sasha Barkov, and who's going to be the answer for Bennett. Again, I think the world of Vinny Trocheck. He's a former teammate of mine. I think he can do so much up and down the ice, but I worry. How's Panarin going to be against these big, heavy forwards? How's Alexis Lafreniere going to be? He got very quiet when that series got tight in Carolina. He had that good little stretch. And I bickered with Johnny Lazarus about him all year on Morning Cup of Hockey. And I told him, if that line is going to go, Loff has to step up. He cannot vanish when the game gets heavy. So this matchup is it really is intriguing to me. And I just, I went back and forth, but ultimately I like the Florida Panthers, and I like them in 7 games.
Panthers in 7. I really think both these series in the conference finals have a real good chance to go 7 games. Let's keep talking a little bit more about this Eastern Conference final, though, and maybe where some edges are on either side. You just outlined what you like about the Florida Panthers, and you touched on it a bit, but what are some areas that coming in the Rangers have a key difference in, or a key advantage in your eyes?
Look, the biggest advantage the New York Rangers have, and honestly, it's special teams, and their special teams have just been incredible in the playoffs. Their power play is at 31%, which is just gives your team so much confidence in the middle of a game when you're down a goal, or maybe you're up by 1 and your special teams gets out there and has a chance to extend the power play. Their penalty kill is almost 90%. Now, Florida's penalty kill has been good at about 85.5%, but still, you give the edge in the special teams all around to the New York Rangers, and they're going to need it, because when you look around and you look, all right, who's better down the middle? Who's bigger and better on the back end? Maybe you give a little bit of an edge to Shesterkin over Bob. I certainly would give him a little bit of an edge there, but again, we'll save the goalie talk for Carter Hutton. So to me, if the New York Rangers are going to win this series, it's going to have to be with their power play and their special teams. And look, don't kid ourselves. Teams have done that in the playoffs this year, Tyler. And I'll say this. My head says Florida. My heart wants the New York Rangers. I want to see the Rangers against Connor McDavid in the Big Apple. That's what I want to see. It's not what I think I'm going to see, though.
And I also think there's one matchup, and not to sound like a homer or anything, there's one matchup that's clearly better for the NHL on top of it. And I think it's what our hearts want. Like, you want a Canadian market against a massive American
100%.
market with superstars on either side. But I do think, and the betting odds would kind of reflect this, the Panthers and the Stars are the two favorites in these series for good reason.
For sure.
Let's move on, and we'll get back into these two series, talk about goaltending when we get Hutz on in a couple of minutes. But off the ice, Colby, a little bit of a head scratcher yesterday, if I'm being totally honest. Ryan McDonaugh is going back to Tampa Bay. He waives the no move clause. Nashville sends him back to the team where he won rings. And from the Bolts' perspective, as you look at this, a 2nd and a 7th, like, I don't mind the piece of work from Nashville. You're trying to get younger, you're trying to get faster, you're trying to stockpile picks. Like, sure, this is good, and you also lose some money. And I know they have a lot of dead space next season that they got to keep in mind. From Tampa Bay's perspective, you got to sign Steven Stamkos this summer. We assume they want to sign Steven Stamkos this summer. Your window is closing. I'm not sure if adding a big defenseman in his mid to late 30s at a $6.75 million cap hit is the right move to try and keep this window open. I think they should have been trying to get younger and cheaper this offseason, not older and more expensive.
Yeah, Tyler, I'm going to go the other way with you on this one. I am, because I love this move, and I love it because of what Tampa thinks of themselves. Okay. And they think that they're a team that can still win another Stanley Cup in the next year or two. And you look at the market right now, and Frank has talked about the fact that Zadorov is looking for $6 million a year, and he's a 3rd pair defenseman in the NHL, right? So you just put a top pair defenseman, top 2 pair defenseman, a guy who's out on the ice in the last minute of a game when you're down, when you're up by a goal, back on your team, a proven leader. He's got 2 years at 6.7. It's a lot, but you know what? Now look at Tampa's back end. They've got Sergachev, they've got Hedman, they've got McDonough, they've got Chernak, and then you round it out with some cheaper guys in Perbix and Radish. And they'll go out and they'll sign someone for $800. Here's to me what's going to happen. They're going to have to move on from Anthony Cirelli. He makes $6.25. He's got 7 more years on his contract. And I think they made a decision that they've got a 2-year window to get another cup. And Ryan McDonaugh helps them get another cup more than Anthony Cirelli, who only had, in the last 2 years, he's had like 11 goals and 20 goals. And you've got Brandon Hagel, who's turned into basically a 30-goal scorer for you. He had 70-plus points this year because he's another guy that you could potentially talk about. I wouldn't move Hagel. Think about this. This team has 2 more years, and then it's a massive rebuild, right? Is Cirelli really going to help you through a rebuild to when you're good again? No. So I don't mind moving the 26-year-old if you can bring Ryan McDonaugh back. I believe in building your team through the back end. They've got the goaltender. They've got the D-core now. Now you can argue they've got one of the deepest and best defensive cores in the league. I thought McDonaugh was really good for the Nashville Predators in the playoffs. He was playing 20-plus, 5-plus minutes a night. He was drawing hard matchups. He was doing his thing. So I'm in the minority here who really thinks that this is the right move based on the fact that they still want to win this year coming and the year after that before they eventually are going to have to succumb to the rebuild. And I do think moving $6+ million off your cap, that gets them to $11 million in cap space. So you give Stamkos his deal for whatever he wants, let's say $6 million a year. Hopefully he's willing to take less. And then you use the other $5 million to have 2 cheap wingers and a 7th defenseman.
So this is where I'm going to, again, we're definitely on different sides of this. You talk about the rebuilds coming in a couple of years, and it's going to be long. It's going to be painful. We're seeing Pittsburgh go through it to an extent. We're seeing Washington have to face this kind of thing.
Chicago's dealing with it after their big runs.
I don't think it has to be that way, is my point. Kucherov's 30. I think Kucherov's going to be a great player into his late 30s. You look at guys like Hagel and Cirelli, Point's only 28 years old. I think this is a move that's made in the name of keeping and prying the window open for Hedman and Stamkos, when I think the focus very easily could have been on keeping the window open for as long as you can for the next wave of core there. Because now you're right. Like, yeah, what's 28-year-old Anthony Cirelli going to help you in 2 years when you're rebuilding? But at the same time, Arizona got Sean Durzi for a 2nd-round pick. You can go get good quality young players. You could have added and upgraded while also getting younger, especially because you're Tampa Bay and everybody wants to play there.
Yeah. Look, you make valid points, but I look at this from a different way, because who are you going to get to add to your top 4 for that number right now? For just giving up draft picks like that, a proven top 4 leader with Stanley Cup experience. I think Tampa is all about the now. Okay. They don't have capital to rebuild. They're not thinking rebuild right now. Eventually they're going to have to trade Kucherov, and they're going to have to trade Hedman and these guys at the end of their careers potentially. And that's how they'll reload. Even Braden Point, you got to think in a couple of years becomes a guy that they might have to move off of, because he's going to be 32 at that point, 33 at that point. So I get it based on what Julian Breezewald thinks of this team, based on how aggressive he was to get Tanner Jeannot. And I think when you watch them play Florida in the first round, they were missing defensemen. They didn't have Sergachev, but they were missing another, sandpaper defensive defenseman who can make big time defensive plays 26, 27 minutes a night. So I think Ryan McDonaugh is a special player. I don't think he's ever been given the credit that he deserves. And I thought he was good this year in Nashville.
Again, we're going to get to Carter Hutton in a few minutes here, but let's continue the offseason talk. And there's a story coming out today. Kevin Weeks was on it a couple hours ago. He's saying it's sounding like Jim Hiller could have a multi-year contract to be the LA Kings' next head coach. I know some other insiders have chimed in on this one as well. Colby, I'll be honest, this is a big summer for LA. They got question marks between the pipes. I think that forward group and Pierre-Luc Dubois, I think there are question marks there. I don't know if this is the right call. We kind of heard players. We heard guys throughout the year be like, we don't like the 1-3-1. We think we got to change things up. You heard in the post elimination in their garbage or locker room cleanout day, I should say, players were saying, yeah, it might be fun to try something new. Is bringing back the same guy the right move? I know he was only there for a few months, so maybe they want to give him like a full off season to instill his own systems. But I feel like if there's any team that got bounced in the first couple of rounds that could have used a bit of an organizational shakeup, it's the Kings.
Yeah, well, look, we don't know. Look, 21-12-1 is a pretty good record for your
Fair.
first time as a head coach in the NHL. And the problem with the 1-3-1 is it has a short lifespan. We see that the LA Kings are so good at it for the first half of the season, and then guys don't want to play it anymore. It sucks the joy out of playing because there's no creativity to it. It's very robotic. Now, my assumption would be that Jim Hiller said, I don't want to coach the 1-3-1. I want to open things up. I want to go to a new system. And I started looking up Hiller's, career, because I'm not that familiar with it, to be honest. And one thing that stuck out to me was that he's not bounced around year to year. He's generally stayed in the same places for 3 and 4 seasons throughout his coaching career. He spent 8 years in the WHL as a head coach, way back. 4 with Chilliwack and a couple with Tri-City. And then he comes to the NHL and he spends 4 years with the Leafs, 4 years with the Islanders, and then 2.5 years with the LA Kings before he gets an opportunity to be head coach. Look, I'm all for giving someone who's not a retread an opportunity to be a head coach. 21-12-1 shows me that you have a level of competence that you can coach behind the bench. And I think they probably saw enough. I think the players probably gave him some bit of blessing in the turnout of his meetings. And I think you're going to see a different style. You're going to not see a 1-3-1 strict, type of situation in the neutral zone next year. And look, they've got some cap space. They've got to sign Byfield, Kaliev, Lizotte. Those are RFAs. Arvidsson's a UFA, so he obviously commands a little bit more. They'll do what they want to do with him. I mean, what a great deal that was for them. But look, I do think that this is a big summer, and I just want to sort of push back on you a little bit, Tyler, and say, what should they have done? Should they have gone to Woodcroft? Obviously they're not going to rehire. Todd McClellan's always the man of the hour who gets rehired everywhere, but I think it's okay to see a guy who has put his time in as an assistant coach. He's coached in the WHL. He had some success. He went to a conference final a couple of times in that league. Give him an opportunity to have a full season. That's the only way we're ever going to get new blood and new ideas and people who are looking at the game a little bit differently. So I don't hate it. I'd like to give this guy a chance and see what he can do with a full season under his belt as a head coach.
We got a Kings fan in the YouTube chat says Hiller is okay. I just want to see a new system, and I think that's fair as well. You make a good point. If the players sat there and were like, no, we like him, we just don't like the system, and if Hiller says, yeah, you give me a full summer to kind of sink my teeth into this thing, I'll come up with something new and fresh to give us a spark, then yeah, it's not a bad move.
And you're not going to come in with 3 months left in a season and change everything. There's not enough practice time in the NHL. And you really need to go through practice to go through live reps and sort of work through things. So let's see what the guy can do, before we say it's not a good signing.
All right, we are running behind on today's show. Colby and I on opposite sides of a lot of things. It's creating a lot of debate, but let's get into our big segment for today. It's the Blue Paint with Carter Hutton. The Blue Paint is powered by Booster Juice. Visit a location today to refuel, refresh, and re-energize, or download their new Booster Rewards app to earn, order, and enjoy. Carter Hutton, the former NHL netminder, joins us to talk a little bit about the situations between the pipes in these conference final series that are getting going. And let's start out west, Huts. We've already talked a bit about the East today, but it's clear in that Oilers-Stars series who has the advantage between the pipes. Jake Ottinger didn't have his best regular season, but he's been great in these playoffs. Have you seen anything different from him that's elevated his game?
Well, I think it's a product of him and his maturity, right? I think last time he had a good playoff run, it was the young, he's younger. Now expectations have set in. I think during the regular season, it can be a bit overwhelming, but I also think he's a benefit of a deep Dallas Stars hockey team. And for me, the key is his timely saves, his third period, his overtime, how he's played, and 5-on-5 with a .941 save percentage. That's going to keep any team in games. So for me, I think it's just the maturity level of him kind of blossoming into a goalie that, we thought he could be a few years ago. And now he has that experience between the years to go out there and be patient and play well in these big games.
Tyler, I want to stay with that series and kind of go to the other dressing room and talk a little Stuart Skinner. I think that was a big story in the last round. He loses the net for a couple of games to his backup. Then he comes back in game 6 and 7 and puts together really good showings. I think his team put together good showings, but I think he did too. From a goalie's viewpoint, Did you see technical differences in the way that he played? Was it confidence related? I know we always talk about the reset. That seems to be the popular word of the hour right now in the NHL when you sit a guy down for a reset. So from your eyes, what did you see out of Skinner?
No, Colby, I think you're right. A little bit of a reset. And for me, I believe it's confidence, right? And I think this is something that isn't foreign to Stuart Skinner, right? At times he's been rock solid. Then at times he struggles and he kind of fails the eye test when things aren't going well. He's a little more scrambly. He's outside of his post. He fights rebounds. He doesn't track it as well. When he is dialed in, I think it was a great break where having a nice veteran like Kelvin Pickard to come in and just kind of seal the gap a little bit, calm things down, and get him back in, where I thought in game 6, he looked pretty fragile to me against that Vancouver Canucks, and they weren't able to capitalize on it. And then I think as the game went on, and Vancouver was a team that didn't really create a lot of quantity in their offense, right? So I think it was a great situation where they protected him. They did a good job. And this is an Edmonton Oilers team that can score. They're scoring 3.5 goals a game against the Vancouver Canucks in that series. So I think for him, if you can keep it at 2, keep it at 3, you're giving your team a chance. But this Dallas Stars team is going to create a little bit more of a problem with their depth. So for Stuart Skinner, I think going down there, finding his confidence that he has now from, building off that game 6 and game 7 win, he can be a difference maker for this Edmonton Oilers team to get over the hump.
And it's got to be a bit of a help too, like you said, when you have that Oilers offense in front of you and you're Stuart Skinner and you go, okay, even if I make one mistake, like the guys in front of me are going to pick me up to some extent, right?
Yeah, it kind of gives me the Darcy Kemper vibes of the Colorado Avalanche that year, right? I think, majority of the times a team wins the Stanley Cup or in the Stanley Cup, their goalie is in the conversation for the Conn Smythe. But that year, Darcy finished with a .904 save percentage. He wasn't amazing, by any means at certain times, but, he just needed to be solid because he had the star-studded lineup, where it kind of gives me the same vibe with Stuart Skinner, where, the stars of Edmonton are going to carry the team. You just need to make timely saves and keep your team in games.
Out east, Sergei Bobrovsky. He had an interesting first series against Tampa Bay because there were a couple of tough games that kind of cratered his numbers. But you look at the game logs against Boston, and it's like 1s and 2s in the goals against column, and nothing really more than that. What have you made of Bobrovsky so far this postseason? And is it the same dominant Bobrovsky we saw a year ago in the Stanley Cup playoffs?
I think it is. He didn't start well last year in the first round too. Very similar numbers, nothing, amazing. And like you touched on, Ty, I think there was a few games there. Game 4, when they tried to close out, he gave up 6 in Tampa, right? Kind of hurts your numbers. But for me, it's his high danger save percentage, like at specific times when games are tight, because obviously we all know what Jeremy Swayman was doing in the Boston end, but Florida still was giving up chances and he was making timely saves during that series. So I think for me in this, he's going to be challenged, right? Especially we know how the Rangers power play is. They're going to get to the net. They're a little deeper than Boston. So this is going to be a good challenge for Bobrovsky. What I love is his maturity, right? He's calmer. You can watch him carry himself. Even when he gets scored on, he kind of has a reset. And when they score as well, he has a reset. He has a way to kind of stay focused mentally in the moment, which I think will be important, especially playing at MSG this week.
So then let me just ask you this question, plain and simple. Who's got the edge? Is it Bob or is it Shesterkin? Because my eye leans Shesterkin.
Yeah, I don't think your eye's doing you wrong here, Cobes. Shesterkin is a guy that has a lot of playoff success. And you look 2 years ago playing in that conference final against Tampa, right? So he has that experience and he played very well in that series. And his numbers are through the roof during the playoffs. So for me, again, I talk about Bob's maturity and experience and how calm he is at times, where it'll be interesting to see how Shesterkin reacts here, because this is going to be a different series for him. They're going to try to get in his face. They're going to try to make it hard on him. And at certain times, he can have a short fuse, right? So it'll be interesting to see if he can manage those emotions during a tough series when teams are trying to make it hard on him. But trust me, I'll tell you one thing, the Florida Panthers know how good he is, and they're going to try to make it hell on him during this series.
What are your predictions, Carter? Who you got winning each series and how many games?
I honestly love the Dallas Stars here, but I'm biased to this Edmonton Oilers. I want to see Connor McDavid and Draisaitl get over the hump, so I'm going to go with the Edmonton Oilers. And in the East, I'm going to take the New York Rangers.
Wow.
All right, I love it.
Wow. All right.
That'd be a hell of a cup final.
Your head went where my heart went, but I had to go the other way because my head said differently.
That's okay. That's what we're here for. We got to disagree. It's a disagree day, I hear.
Yeah, it is. Colby and I have been going toe to toe all show. Huts, appreciate your time, man. Thanks for doing this.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having me on.
Our daily face-off inbox question is brought to you by Douglas Mattresses. You can order today at douglas.ca/DFO. And right now, every mattress order comes with a free comfort sleep bundle. You get 2 memory foam pillows with pillow protectors, 1 luxurious cotton sheet set, and 1 mattress protector free with every order at douglas.ca/DFO. We got a couple for you in the YouTube chat here, Colb. Just on Rangers Panthers. Who was it? Izzy wants to know, would you play Matt Rempe tonight to try send a message to the Florida Panthers? Or would you just say, hey, let's win it playing good skilled hockey. Let's not get dragged into that kind of stuff.
Look, with the opportunity to get Philip Hedl back into the lineup, I just don't see how you can give up that spot to Matt Rempe. And the thing about it is that I don't know who Matt Rempe's intimidating on this Florida team. I mean, is he going to go out against Matthew Tkachuk? Is he going to go out against Bennett? Is he going to go out against Barkov? No, he only plays 4.5 minutes a night. And in a series that I think is destined to go 7, where teams are going to need 4 lines, you're going to need 10, 12 minutes out of your 4th line in this series, because at the end of the day, these are going to be long, grinding games. I think we could see overtimes. I think they could be low scoring. So no, I would not put Rempe in unless you feel like you're getting bullied after maybe game 1 of the playoffs. I just think that the Rangers are too deep up front. I think he's a nice insurance policy, but I think he's too much of a liability. That's just my opinion.
Second one, this one comes in from Joe. He wants to know who you think is now the best fit for the Devils job with Berube off the market.
Yeah, look, I really thought the Berube thing was going to happen just because he lives in New Hope, PA, which is 45 minutes from Newark. I just thought it made way too much sense. Look, I think if you look at the New Jersey Devils and what they need, it's probably structure. And I think if you're looking for a guy who can give you a lot of structure, I think Todd McClellan is probably that guy. Now, the question becomes are the New Jersey Devils going to be a 1-3-1 team? Are you going to get those skilled players and those types of young offensively gifted guys buying into a 1-3-1? Probably not. So I think probably Sheldon Keefe's job to lose would be my guess. He's dealt with superstar players before. I do think he found ways to get buy-in from those guys. I know he took a lot of heat, but I think that was roster construction. But let me just say this. Doesn't matter who the head coach is. They need a goaltender. Until that team gets a goaltender, they're going to have issues.
Let's move along to our daily bets for the day. We got hockey on the TV tonight out in New York. Our betting segment is brought to you by Bet365, the largest sports betting platform globally. Sign up today and use the promo code DAILY365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Colby, I got a couple for you for tonight's game. First off, a little shot prop parlay. Carter Verhaeghe, Alex Lafreniere. It comes out to plus 220. They each just have to go over 2.5 shots on goal. Verhaeghe was on a nice run. It hit this in 3 or 4 straight games. Missed in the last game of their series against Boston. Lafreniere is in the same spot, actually, as well. Hitting 3 games in a row. Missed in the last game. I like both of them to bounce back at plus 220. And we just talked goaltending, but I'm going over tonight, Colby. I think the Rangers on home ice will find a way to get the offense going a little bit early. Could open up the game a little bit. You like either side of the over-under in this one?
You know what? I think the over is always the safer bet. I do think, though, that this game is going to be low scoring. I think the first period will be all about feeling each other out. I think both of these teams had long layoffs, so there'll just be a little bit of an incubation period to start this hockey game. So I don't know. I like the Verhaeghe over. I like the shot prop there. I worry about Lafreniere, though, to go over 3.5 shots after the last couple of games. But you usually are right, so I'll give you that much.
Let's wrap up the show with a little bit of garbage time, brought to you by Wendy's. Wendy's only uses fresh Canadian beef that's never seen the inside of the freezer in all of their burgers. Download the Wendy's app today to check out the latest deals. No Frank Saravalli today on the show, but if you want some insight and some analysis from Frank Saravalli, dailyfaceoff.com. Colby's got a new article up outlining the big questions ahead this summer for the 4 teams that got bounced in round 2. Obviously, you have the Canes, Bruins, Canucks, and Avalanche. Out of those 4, Colby, I'm going to ask you one more. Which one of them has the most intriguing or interesting offseason on their hands?
I probably would say the Boston Bruins, because they have so much cap space and they have so many decisions that they need to make. Part of me thinks the Vancouver Canucks would be right there too. And Frank and I kind of went back and forth about this yesterday, because I think Brock Besser is a story nobody's talking about going into the last year of his contract. the blood clot situation. Are you moving on from him? Are you keeping him? So there's definitely a lot of intrigue, but I would probably, out of bias, probably lean into the Boston Bruins, because at the end of the day, they've got half their roster as UFAs. Jake DeBrusk isn't done. What's going to happen with Linus Ullmark? He says he wants to come back. The team has clearly tried to trade him already once. I don't think bringing him back is the right decision. So probably more drama surrounding the Boston Bruins than anyone.
If you want to read that article, the link is in the description of today's episode on YouTube. And just a reminder, it is a game night once again in the Stanley Cup playoffs, which means you can head over to dailyfaceoff.com, hit the DFO games tab, and get in on the playoff parlay challenge. Make your picks every night, and it's your chance to win gift cards to Nation Gear or other retailers, or even one of your favorite team's jerseys. That is a wrap on today's edition of the show. Colby and Frank with you tomorrow. Colby, appreciate you hopping in on back-to-back days, and it was fun disagreeing with you for 31 minutes.
Safe travels to Dallas, and get your boys ready, okay? I'd like to be wrong on that series.
Yeah, absolutely. Big shout out to everyone over in the YouTube for the inbox questions today. We'll be back tomorrow, noon Eastern. Chat with you then.
Thanks for tuning in to Daily Faceoff Live. Make sure you hit the subscribe button to never miss an episode.